Professor Penna Madhusudan, Professor, Dean, Faculty of Bharati Darshan, Kavikula Guru Kalidas Sanskrit University, Maharashtra, who is today's distinguished speaker in this webinar series that we have, and Dr. Geetesh Nirban, co-convener of the webinar series. Dear viewers interested in Mahabharata scholarship, I welcome you all to our webinar series on Mahabharata, initiated under the project Yoga Consciousness in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, the ethical value of societal and political well-being under the scheme of promotion for academic research and collaboration of Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. Our team includes Professor Vishwa Adluri, Professor of Philosophy, Hunter College, USA, Dr. Joydeep Bagchi from Hindu University of America, and Dr. Geetesh Nirban, who is a present host, Kamala Nehru from Kamala Nehru College, Delhi University, Delhi, and me, Professor Bala, who is presently heading the Department of Philosophy at Delhi University. We are supported by two research fellows in the project, Ms. Jayshree and Ms. Anmol, and we have an extended team of two young scholars, Ms. Deepshika and Ms. Megha. Yoga consciousness in Mahabharata, as I have mentioned, is the theme of the project, and the specific pointers that we have chosen for this project are yoga consciousness in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. How yoga consciousness is conceived in these texts, and also trying to look at ethical values of societal well-being in the form of Loka Sangraha. And we are also trying to focus on ethical value of political well-being as well. So these are the things which bring contemporary perspective of the classical text that we have. And the focused question that we would be dealing with in this project is, what is the right course of action? So far, all these, we have moved ahead of almost 15 weeks, I believe. We are into 16th or 17th week today. We thank all the viewers and our supporters for this wonderful support that we have received all these days. And the lectures which were delivered during the course of these weeks of deliberations focused on yoga consciousness, social well-being, political well-being, concept of dharma, and how to deal with ethical dilemmas, or how ethical dilemmas are presented in Mahabharata. So there is a wider canvas that we have completed and we have already deliberated upon during this period. But Mahabharata is not a focused kind of a one, or a simple kind of a one which we can say we have exhausted. That's how even for this webinar series, we have the goal of at least reaching up to 50 webinars, 50 lectures in this webinar series. And there is a lot to still cover up. And in this process, today we have in fact, after reaching a little forward, we are going back to the author of the text, at least the attributed author of the text, and trying to deal with Vyasa. So that is how Professor Penna Madhusudan's talk today on reformative vision of Vyasa in Mahabharata has a very, very important space in this series. As we have been always repeating this, Mahabharata is not just a text which is ended and closed long back. It is an open text, and it was in the oral tradition. It was not just in the oral tradition. It is not just in the oral tradition. It is also a living tradition where people come and perform. It is a performative tradition as well. So if that is the case, how do we go back to the author and try to understand him? And also there were many questions that the modern intellectuals, because of various quests that they had towards historicity of a text, raised during academic deliberations as to which Vyasa is this, who is this Vyasa, kind of questions. But for the text, it is only one Vyasa who has written it, as it is attributed to him. But the point that I think today's deliberation would be focused on is, as I said, the main focus of the webinar is what is the right course of action. So probably if Professor Penna Madhusudan is looking at reformative vision of Vyasa in Mahabharata, I'm assuming that probably what is the right course of action that was envisioned by Vyasa in Mahabharata would be, I think, coming up in this course of the discussion. So I'm eagerly looking forward to listening to Professor Penna Madhusudan, and I'm sure all of you are also eagerly waiting to listen to him. And we understand that we have started a little early, but I think it's going to be really fruitful to all of us to begin a day with Mahabharata and with Vyasa specifically is really going to make some difference to our lives. So with that hope, I leave it to Dr. Geetesh to proceed further and introduce Professor Penna Madhusudan to the audience and to all of us. Over to you, Dr. Geetesh. Go ahead.
Good morning and namaskar to all of you. It's such a joy to see a lot of participants, in spite of the fact that we are starting a series very early, sharp, nearly at 9 a.m. And we are very honored to have amongst us Dr. Penna Madhusudan, who is a professor and dean of Faculty of Indian Religion, Philosophy and Culture at Kavi Kulguru Kalidas Sanskrit University, Nagpur in Maharashtra. He is a Sanskrit scholar with equal understanding of traditional and modern streams of Shastra. He has studied and taught Nyaya, Vedanta, Yoga, and other subjects. He has written 34 books on several subjects related to his research interest. Dr. Penna's research papers have been published in a number of journals in Telugu, Marathi, and English languages. With many awards to his credit, it's a joy to share that one of his poems has received the Sahitya Academy Award this year in 2020. National Sanskrit University, Tirupati has conferred honorary DLitt on Dr. Penna. His CDs on Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Dashopanishad, Yoga Shastra, Advait Vedanta, to name a few, have been released too. And today we are going back to the beginning of the text, as Professor Bala said, to the author of the text, after discussing interesting issues related to the text during the last 14 webinars that we have organized. And we are happy to have a very a renowned scholar talking on the author of Mahabharata. And the title of Professor Penna's address, as we see, is Reformative Vision of Vyasa in Mahabharata. I'm sure we're going to really gain a lot, as Professor Bala said, because I think he's the first person who's talking about Veda Vyasa in the series of webinars that we have started and we are going on under the aegis of Spark Project. I now hand it over to Professor Penna to deliver his address.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah, I welcome all of you and my sincere namaskar to all the seekers of knowledge. Actually, a few days back, I received an invitation from the organizers to share my knowledge of this topic. Now, after understanding the magnanimity of the project, I realize that I should have given more time, or I should have been given more time, because it's really a very big subject. Talking about either Vyasa or Mahabharata is not that easy, but still, I would like to share some of my views with all of you. Sometime back in Mangalore, in that this university in Mangalore, there was a special program on Mahabharata again, because those people were also working on the Mahabharata project So in connection with that, they had invited and I had spoken on that. So I realized there is a simple problem. Like when people take the name of Vyasa, so there are two streams. Some people believe that there was one Vyasa, an individual, and everything they accept. But others are there, uh, equally scholarly people. So they think that Vyasa was not an individual. It was only an institution, like group of people. So Vyasa is an institute, they believe. And because of that, uh, when I try to talk about Vyasa, they think that unnecessarily you are attributing something to uh, an individual who did not exist at all. And they say many people contributed to the colossal work of Mahabharata. So whatever ideas we find in the Mahabharata are actually the ideas of several people, because uh, the way it originated, the Mahabharata, later how it got amalgamated, and all the new ideas were just added to that, and thus the work has become an enormous kind of work, like 1 lakh Shatasahasri Samhita. But I still believe that it was an individual called Vyasa, because there are so many anecdotes in the Mahabharata itself, and we have equally authentic accounts about his life in Yoga Vasishtha and other Puranas also. So I cannot just brush aside that Vyasa was only an institute and many people worked on it like clerks, etc. I don't believe. And the way the character of Vyasa was introduced and later developed, and there are many occasions when Vyasa Maharshi came to Pandavas and other people, and he had shared his knowledge, experience, and had given them a direction. Therefore, we cannot just say that Vyasa was only an institute. So this particular premise is to be accepted, that Vyasa was an individual, because uh, the way I'll discuss all these matters. Yeah, with all humble salutations to this great soul who has shown us the path of karma, jnana, bhakti, yoga, I go ahead with my presentation. Vyasa is actually the reformative sage. See, the individuals are with us, amongst us, but the problem is we just fail in understanding their contribution sometimes, their merits sometimes. And just imagine an individual who may have existed few thousand years back still exerts that kind of influence on us. And the entire Indian, this scenario, like the cultural, the philosophical, religious. So all these aspects are so much influenced by Vedavyasa that we cannot just ignore his great contribution. So therefore, some aspects I would like to discuss. Like first, historicity of his this individual. Vyasa, did he exist? So that is the question. And in spite of several accounts in Puranas, Yoga Vasishtha, and Mahabharata itself, people still question, Vyasa, did he exist? And I would like to tell all these people that generally a text takes several forms. In course of time, it takes several forms. It actually changes from its basic form to different forms. It changes, of course, unless you are very particular about retaining the originality of the text. Otherwise, it changes. It happened with Bible and any other text. So, when Mahabharata was written, you all know that initially it was only 24,000 shlokas of Bharata, Jaya Samhita. And some people say it was only 8,000 shloka. But it is still believed that Vyasa Maharshi, or that particular individual, he wrote that Mahabharata in 24,000 shloka, but only to give us a gist of the entire Mahabharata, he himself had written 150 shlokas in the Anukramanika Adhyaya. So that is in the beginning of the Mahabharata that you find 150 shlokas in which he has given a kind of summary of all the chapters of Mahabharata. So through that we can understand his entry and about himself, and later how things developed throughout Mahabharata. So everything we can find in the beginning itself. And if at all these internal evidence or the pieces of information is to be believed, then he belonged to a particular time after the Vedic age, about 950 BC. This is generally believed. But as you find in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, that is the first skandha, in each age, a different Vyasa takes birth. So there is a Vyasa in Krita Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga, they believe. Like if you compare, in each Kalpa, there will be different Avatara, different Manu, different Indra, different Saptarshi, and different Vyasa also. So thus, each age requires an individual in the form of Vyasa. But an individual accomplishing a big, enormous task is really unbelievable. Therefore, we call such person as Bhagavan, Bhagavan Vedavyasa, Bhagavan Vasishtha, because that work they have given to us or bequeathed to the next generation is unbelievable. Therefore, the honorary epithet or attachment to their name is Bhagavan. And Bhagavan is the word attached to very few people, like Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Why? Because an individual raising himself to the higher consciousness and contributing a lot to the society in the form of influencing day-to-day life of the people and establishing himself as a god. This is unbelievable. We cannot do that. So that's why we prefer to call them as Bhagavan, because Bhaga stands for Aishwarya. That means the lordship or the supreme power. That is Bhaga, Bhagavan. So whoever possesses that enormous energy is known as Bhagavan. That's what the Vishnu Purana tells us. So thus, this Veda Vyasa, if it is to be believed, he belonged to a period after the Vedic age, about 950 BC. Then, if Veda Vyasa is Bhagavan, was he born really? And we refer to the first chapter of Mahabharata, where it is clearly mentioned that Parashara Maharshi met Satyavati, and there Veda Vyasa Maharshi was born. And it is in the beginning of the Mahabharata, therefore, it should be after the Vedic age. And very typically, in the list enumerated, the seers of the Vedic period, we don't find the mention of Vyasa. So therefore, it should be definitely after Vedic age, about 950 BC. But again, the problem is identifying this individual with the author of Brahma Sutra, Puranas, Mahabharata, so all this. So can there be a really reliable evidence to believe that Veda Vyasa is same Badarayana or Krishna Dvaipayana? So we will discuss in course of time. And according to this particular account, he was born to Parashara. The story is there in the Mahabharata itself. And Parashara was son of Shakti, and Shakti was son of Vasishtha. And again, somewhere in the Mahabharata itself, we find in the beginning few chapters that Shakti was a very powerful sage. But what happens, according to that particular story, one Kalmashapada, a king. So because he was influenced by Vishwamitra, he loses his temperament and he starts cursing, starts uh, disturbing people, harassing them. Then he receives a curse. And when he meets Shakti on the way, then Shakti also curses him. And after that only we find that that particular Kalmashapada who takes the demon form, he eats away. He kills Shakti and eats away. So this is the sad end of Shakti's life. And after that demise, this Vasishtha, who's father of Shakti, he has several sons. Shakti is the eldest one, but Kalmashapada eats away Shakti and all the other sons. Therefore, Vasishtha, he loses all interest and tries to kill himself by throwing himself into the waters from the top of the mountain. But unfortunately, what happens, or fortunately, what happens that all the while he will be saved. So Vasishtha, he loses all hopes because he cannot kill himself, and he just walks on the way. Then he hears somebody chanting the Vedic mantra, and when he looks back, he finds a lady, and nobody is there, but still Vedic chanting is heard. Then he asks her. Then she says, "I am wife of Shakti, and I am carrying, and there is a boy, there is some child in my uh, womb." Then Vasishtha realizes, then he waits for that boy to come out, and he is Parashara. And he names Parashara because he says, because of you only I am alive today, and that's why you are Parashara. And to Parashara, Vyasa Maharshi was born, and immediately after his birth, Vyasa Maharshi realizes the purpose of his life, and he leaves his parents and says, "I'm going to the top of mountain. I have come here only to perform penance." And Vyasa Maharshi goes there. And Vyasa Maharshi's son Shuka Maharshi is very popular in the Bhagavata and in Yoga Vasishtha also. And towards the end of the Yoga Vasishtha, there is a story where it is very clearly described that Shuka Maharshi, after getting that realization from Janaka Rajarshi, so a very typical thing that Shuka Maharshi gets all the knowledge from his father, but only to assure himself that whatever he has got is authentic, he goes to Janaka. This story is depicted in Narada Purana also. And he goes to Janaka, and when Janaka Rajarshi tells him that this is self-realization, there is no doubt in that. And he immediately leaves and goes to the Meru Parvata, and for 10,000 years, as the story goes, 10,000 years he performs penance, and there only he leaves his body. That is the end of Shuka Maharshi also. So this particular account is very clear that an individual was there, he was born, his grandfather, great-grandfather, his son, everything is very clearly mentioned in the text. See, if there were no individual like Vyasa Maharshi, all these details would have not come down to us. Therefore, there is enough evidence to believe that there was an individual. Now, whether the same individual had composed the entire Mahabharata, etc., again we will discuss. Then, this Vyasa Maharshi, as we understand him from his available works, he is a historian, an astronomer, a philosopher. This is in general terms of the Dwapara Yuga, because when Sri Krishna Paramatma, we say, Lord Krishna left this abode, so that particular moment only Kali he entered. So therefore, that was the end of Dwapara Yuga. And he was a great historian, because I really admire Vyasa Maharshi, because whoever may be the individual, but the individual has immensely contributed to the unity of India, not political unity, but you find here cultural unity, religious unity, and philosophical, because this particular individual has understood the every bit of this India, this nation, this particular region, that from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Dwaraka to Kamarupa, that is Assam, that particular individual has known all the details of this particular region, because see, the mountains, the rivers, the dynasties, the gods and goddesses of this particular region, and the political uh, happenings in this country. So everything, he was very particular about it, and he was noting down everything. And uh, all these accounts we find in the Puranas also, like Vishnu Purana, Matsya Purana, we find these details. So he was a historian, there is no doubt, and an astronomer, because everything Vyasa Maharshi was connecting with the happenings in the sky. Recently, we had seen the Panchagraha Putami. So similarly, he was observing, and whatever was occurring on the earth, he was correlating with the occurrences in the sky also. So he was a very good astronomer, because before him there was Lagatha, the Vedic Vedanga Jyotisha. So the very sacred knowledge he has got from his father, and he was a great philosopher, we understand, because the way he wanted to see this nation, India was not then. There was no India at all. That was Aryavarta, Bharata Varsha. But the nation he wanted to see, he has presented in most of his works. And we know that this particular individual, he had got this great epithet like Veda Vyasa. And Vyasa, therefore, people believe that it is only a title given to an individual, because he was born on the Dvipa Krishna Dvaipayana. He was born in the dark complexion, therefore Krishna. All these are ascribed to him, but Veda Vyasa is the popular name because he has divided the Vedas the way actually they can survive. See, during the time of Veda Vyasa, Veda was forgotten. Before that, Vedo Nama Shabdarashi, as Sayanacharya says, that was one Shabdarashi, and people were unable to memorize, and actually they failed to understand the practical utility of the Veda also. And Vyasa Maharshi, he had taken the same Shabdarashi, and he had arranged them according to their characteristics, like the Richa, the Yaju, the Sama, Atharva. So this categorization, this is because of Veda Vyasa, and that's why Jaimini Maharshi also in the Mimamsa Sutra, he remembers Veda Vyasa with all respect. He says Gitishu Samakhya and the Mantreshu Ruchaha. So all this because of Veda Vyasa, and because of that only the four Vedas, they have come down to us. He is known as Krishna Dvaipayana, Krishna also, and sometimes Badarayana, because he was born in the that Badara Vana, Badarika Ashrama Vana. So therefore Badarayana. So this is also given to him. And now when we try to understand his vision, Vyasa, actually he stands for that vision. We cannot separate the vision, because in our tradition we believe that the individual, whoever gets a kind of vision, is Rishi. Rushir Darshanat, we say. Munihi Mananat. So that is the basic difference between the two. That Rushihi Darshanat. That means, see, you are also an individual, a human being. I am also an individual, human being. But we do something. We actually strain ourselves so much to get something. And that something is sometimes external, some monetary benefit, and sometimes it is internal, that we get a vision. And particular vision gives us a direction, a purpose of life. See, this is very important. Every one of us gets it. That is the vision. See, because of that only, an ordinary person becomes a Rishi, then Maharshi, Rajarshi, Devarshi, all that. And Vyasa Maharshi is a very good example of that kind of Rishi. Because a common man, that means a person born in any family like any other person, he raises himself. And that particular process is known as penance, tapas. Tapasya is not just growing beard, locked hair, matted hairs, and going to the top of mountain, or retiring to a solitary place like forest, etc. See, Vyasa Maharshi himself tells us that this is not tapasya. This is not tapasya. Na tapaha sharira shoshanam. He says tapasya doesn't mean that you have to torture yourself, but he says tapasya is absolutely intrinsic, internal. So we all do tapasya, and that's why we prosper, we go ahead in our field. And the person who practices rigorous penance and achieves some vision, he is known as Maharshi, and Vyasa Maharshi is a very good example of that, because the vision is deep rooted in dharma. That's why in the beginning of Mahabharata, he says very clearly that dharmat arthascha kamascha kimartham nasasevyate urdhvabahu viraum yeshaha nachakaschit srunoti mam. So he himself tells us that actually with open hands I tell every one of you, this is I'm exhorting. So to every one of you, the message is dharmat arthascha kamascha. Dharma should be the base of human life, because through dharma only we can attain artha and kama. See, artha is money, of course, in general term, through which we can fulfill our dreams. That is kama. So these two are the driving forces of any species. Kama, that is the first one, even in animals and anything. Then artha, that is the means to fulfill our desire. So these two, artha and kama, of course, these two are common. Nobody can teach us. But when it comes to driving, these driving forces are goading them in proper direction. So you have the dharma as the goading element, the driving element. So the artha and kama should have a direction. Otherwise, what happens? Artha, kama, they may land that particular person in some calamity. As the Bhagavad Gita tells us that ultimately buddhinashat pranashyati. So that will be the result of all that. That means personality collapse, and that should not take place. That's why the ancient seers like Vedavyas Maharshi, they have given us the dharma. So this particular a kind of command, this actually commands us that this is not the proper direction. So you should take this direction only to fulfill or make your life meaningful. So this is dharma. And Vedavyasa Maharshi, as I understand him throughout the Mahabharata and Puranas, he is totally rooted in the dharma. That means all his ideology is rooted in dharma, that he finds this dharma at cosmic level, that is cosmos, the Vishwa dharma. How dharma really regulates the cosmic law. And that's why people equate the cosmic law with the dharma, that is Vishwa dharma. And Vishwa dharma is in the form of all the galaxies and the planets. They are rotating in their particular axis, everything fixed, but still moving. So this particular, this Vishwa is known as Jagat and Vishwa in Sanskrit, very typical. But if you give a simple thought to that particular word, you will appreciate that this universe, a matter of our direct perception, is called Vishwa, because Vishu, Vishati, to enter. And there is another Vishnu Gato and Vishnu Vyapto. There is another root, which means spreading. And now recently, maybe a few hundred years back, people have known that this universe is expanding. Even during the time of Newton and later Einstein, and recently that Max Planck and Hubble. So they have actually understood that the universe is expanding. And that the word is given to that Vishnu Vyapto, Vishwa. And Vyasa Maharshi has given in the Vishnu Sahasranama also, Vishwam Vishnuhu. So the universe is expanding, and that particular reality which permeates is Vishnu, he said. And he is really very particular about the word Vishnu. Now, after that cosmic law in the form of dharma, we come to our own nation. This is Rashtra Dharma. So a nation, how it should be, what are the dharma? And when naturally when we talk about nation, we talk about the Raja Dharma. then Praja Dharma. And everyone is actually controlled by some force, invisible force. It is known as Dharma. But that particular invisible force leads the individual into success and very purposeful life, meaningful life. So therefore, Dharma at all levels should be properly understood, and the entire effort of Vyasa Maharshi is to make us know this particular Dharma, that expansion of Dharma and practicality of Dharma. So that's why he has given us the Rashtra Dharma. At several places of Mahabharata, we understand how he explains this Dharma through different characters, sometimes through Bhishma, as we find in the Anushasana Parva, Shanti Parva. So through the character of Bhishma, Vyasa Maharshi gives us the Rashtra Dharma. And even the Shankhalikita and in other episodes also, we find some important information about Rashtra Dharma. And there are many Gita in the Mahabharata which do not deal with the philosophical matters, but the Gita with political message. So such Gitas are there in the Mahabharata, like Monkey Gita. Monkey is the name of a seer there, Rishi, but he talks about politics. And then we have, as it narrows down, we have the Kula Dharma. And Vyasa Maharshi is very, very particular because he knows the importance of this also. That's why in the Mahabharata, in the Bhagavad Gita, he clearly says, Kula Dharma Sanatana, Strishu Dushtasu, Arshneya, Jaite Varnasankaraha. So this is a very, very minute observation of what happens in the families when the nation gets disturbed. And he talks about the family. He says Kula Dharma are to be properly followed. And we all belong to a particular family, a lineage is there, and we should be aware of our Dharma. And thus the entire society is balanced. And when societies are balanced, then they contribute to nation. So thus a nation stands strong. That is the message of Vyasa Maharshi. And for that, he actually exhorts everybody to understand the individual dharma. These are the Vyakti Dharma. Vyakti Dharma means as an individual, what are we supposed to do? And where are we born? What is our history? And what are our duties? See, everything is encapsulated in this particular one, individual dharma. Because Vyakti Dharma, Jati Dharma, Kula Dharma, Rashtra Dharma, and Vishwa Dharma. So from the micro level to the macro level, it actually expands. And when it comes to the individual, because he forms part of that particular society and thus the entire cosmos, the individual has a very good deal of duty to execute. So therefore he says individual, as an individual, you are answerable. So therefore you understand your dharma and try to follow that. Then it's very easy to talk about dharma, but when it comes to practice, it's very difficult. So that's why he has given good number of examples in the Mahabharata itself, where people have followed dharma and reaped the fruit of that, and where people have failed in practicing dharma and what result they had to face, that also he had given through different stories. Otherwise, there is no need of such upakhyana, akhyana, but Vyasa Maharshi deliberately includes all these akhyana and upakhyana only to make us know the importance of individual dharmas. And that's why even after thousands of years, the text remains now, and the entire nation is in a way totally controlled by this, because now everywhere you find Sri Krishna, Sri Rama, the temples and the festivals, the rituals, all these are actually based either in the Mahabharata or the Purana. So you find the Satyanarayana Vrata and other vratas, Payo Vrata, and these vratas are found in the Puranas or Mahabharata or Bhagavata. So therefore, ultimately, they all owe their existence to our Vyasa Maharshi. And in the individual, now we come to Bhagavad Gita, because it is very particular about individual dharma. So if you really are totally unclear, or you say the path of dharma is ambiguous, you are not sure of the dharma, then you read Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita gives practical instructions in Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and even Dhyana Yoga in the 6th chapter of that. So therefore, this is the individual dharma, because when a person is at fix, he is unable to, as Madam was introducing, Geetesh Madam, that when an individual fails in understanding the proper course of action, Bala sir was also telling that karma, understanding that is very difficult. Which course of action is proper in this particular society, this particular time? So please refer to the Bhagavad Gita. You have there karma, akarma, vikarma. Karmanopi bodhavyam, bodhavyancha akarmana, vikarmanaschapi bodhavyam, gahana karmano gati. When Vyasa Maharshi says through Bhagavad Gita, he is very clear that karma is very difficult to understand, but still you don't lose hopes, because the Taittiriya Upanishad tells us, yadi te vritta vichikitsa va karma vichikitsa va syat, ये तत्र ब्राह्मणा सम्मर्षिणः युक्ता अयुक्ताः अलुक्षाः कामस्यु अलुक्षाः ते यथा तत्र वर्तेरन् त्वं तथा तत्र वर्तेथाः एष आदेशः एष उपदेशः. So this is the proper instruction they have given, that when you are unable to understand the proper course of action, don't lose hopes. You look back and understand these individuals like Maharshi, Rajas, all that, and then you take your action. And thus, the Sri Krishna also taught Arjuna, Vyasa Maharshi taught every one of us that individual dharma is very important. And in this, he has given so many texts to us, like Mahabharata, Puranas, Brahma Sutra, and each one of this stands for a different aspect of Vyasa Maharshi. Starting with the Brahma Sutra stands for his philosophical magnanimity. As an individual, what he possessed and what he wanted to give us, that philosophical wisdom, he has totally summarized in the Brahma Sutra. In 555 sutras, he has given to us the essence of all the Upanishads and the Vedas. So therefore, this is one aspect of the character, Vyasa Maharshi. When we come to Puranas, all the 18 Puranas and Upapuranas, they all stand for the individual, the different aspect of the same individual, that the cultural, geographical, and political. So here we find in Puranas, everything is being attempted to be presented at one place. See, in these Puranas, you find various royal families, their lineage, and you have the geographical. It's very difficult because then the Google map was not available. The atlas, all globes, etc., not available. But still, Vyasa Maharshi could see the nation, the Aryavarta, as if it was on his palm top. Just he was able to see this, visualize, and he had given all the details of this geographical arrangement of this nation. So in Puranas we find that, and apart from that we find in Puranas is another aspect, that how to unite India culturally. The other day we were talking, and in North India also we have Satyanarayana Vrata, in South India also we have Satyanarayana Vrata. So this actually connects India, and the Satyanarayana Vrata is a part of Skanda Purana. And there are several, Payovrata is there in the 8th chapter of Bhagavata, that Aditi performs, that Kashyapa teaches. So this is actually the cultural unity of India. And again we take the name of Vyasa Maharshi, no other sage, because no other sage had this great vision. And when it comes to Mahabharata, one Mahabharata which stands equal to all the poems of Homer, the Odyssey, Iliad, all these put together, 8 times bigger Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata we find a different presentation of Vyasa. So here you find the cultural, geographical, political, philosophical, everything connected to dharma. And that's why the quintessence of Mahabharata we can find in the Bhagavad Gita. And that's why it has still survived as Sanjeevani. And now when it comes to reformation, now why? Where is the need for reformation? So we find that a society is led by doctrines and not applying reasoning. And when generally dogmas and doctrines, they just influence the society. And when the society fails in applying its own logic or reasoning and just blindly following, then there will be social parity. And Vyasa Maharshi is very particular because everywhere he, through his episodes only, he tells us that there should not be any social parity. And all are one, equal. And especially a person cannot get dominance or preference on account of his birth. He tells no. And for that only, one example I'll tell you, in the Mahabharata, we find the episode of Kaushika Upakhyana, where he introduces the story of Kaushika. And he tells Kaushika was a Brahmin, well studied, well versed in all the Vedanga, Shastra, all that, and performs penance, and he has got some accomplishments also, spiritual siddhi also. But just because of his short temperness, so he loses all his power, and he goes to an individual to get this particular knowledge, and that individual happens to be a butcher. He is a dharma vyadha. And Vyasa Maharshi through this story wants to understand this particular one, that dharma vyadha on one side, Kaushika on the other side. Kaushika, a well-versed person, dharma vyadha is a butcher, but he practices dharma and he preaches dharma. And Vyasa Maharshi wants to tell us that you practice the dharma, don't preach it. Because preaching dharma, so many preachers are there, even today. But when it comes to practice, they fail, and that's why they land themselves somewhere, as we know nowadays. And this is very important message of Veda Vyasa Maharshi, who has found the nation as one, politically, philosophically, geographically, socially, and culturally. And this is great contribution and the great vision of Veda Vyasa Maharshi throughout his texts. And for that, he has given a provision for us. Our thought, our practice, and character, all these should be properly guided. And for that, he has given us not one Bhagavad Gita, several Gita in the Mahabharata and Bhagavata also, Shruti Gita, Kapila Gita. So all these actually tell us that if we are unable to know the reality, understand, then we have the guidance, we have the guides like the Bhagavata, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, all that. So first thing is, our thoughts should be properly channelized. Otherwise, what happens? Chitta Nadi Nama Ubhayato Vahini Vahati Kalyanaya Vahati Papaya Cha. Yoga Bhashya tells us that our thoughts may take us anywhere. But if we give a proper channel to them, then Vahati Kalyanaya. So they will be good, beneficial to us. And for that, we have to practice Abhyasa Vairagya. Both are there. In the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Abhyasena cha kaunteya, Vairagyena cha gruhyate. So today is the day, should not be postponed. And today is the means and goal by itself. So that is the summum bonum of practice, the spiritual practice. And for that, as Lord Buddha said, Sheelam, Prajna Sheela Samadhi. So the Sheelam is very important. That is actually the character. And all these put together, it becomes a very important guideline for us in our spiritual life also. Vyasa Maharshi has given even this to us. And the reformative ideas, one practical philosophy, because he has condemned blind, just blind understanding of the Veda also. That's why he says, Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunya Bhavajna Nirdvandva Nitya Satvastho Niryogakshema Atmavan. In the Bhagavad Gita, he says, see, all the three Vedas are also rooted in Guna, and they will be talking about Guna, and they will rake up you in something else. But if you are rooted in yourself, you will contribute positively to the society. And for that, you have to sit in silence. Then you calm down your senses. For that, you have to know how to school your senses. You know that, then practice it. Nistraigunyo bhavarjuna. And for that, if you do not perform Vedic rituals or do not believe in Vedic deities, no problem. But believe in yourself. That's what in the Bhagavata he tells us, that when all the Gopalaka, they approached Sri Krishna and said, Indra will be angry with us. He will not give rain to us. Then through Lord Sri Krishna, Vedavyasa Maharshi says, don't believe in Indra. You believe in your fields, you believe in your agriculture, you believe in your animals, you believe in your mountains and rivers. That's all. So this is the vision, because Vishwam Vishnuhu, in the Vishnu Sahasranama, Vyasa Maharshi has given to us. This Vishwam itself is Vishnu. Don't believe in something invisible. Believe in the visible, because it is the manifestation of the God's power, he said. So Vedic deities, Vedic rituals also at several places, he said, these are important. But when it comes to Karya Vichakshane, so Tasmat Shastram Pramanante. So he said Shastra. That means the guiding principle should be there. And that's why he has, in a way, synthesized the Vedic ideology. And several such reformative ideas we find, especially when it comes to gender and caste and reputation of family. Vedavyasa Maharshi says, it is of no use. See, don't always boast of yourself like, I belong to this caste, I belong to this gender, I belong to this reputed family. It's of no use. You are an individual and you understand your own potentiality and stand on your own legs and show to the world what you are. And that's there. And don't just take the name of your family, because we have seen even today that family name does not help. And now it's almost 10. And madam told me that there will be a kind of discussion. So if you permit, I'll stop here and we will have a meaningful discussion.
I request all the participants to send in their questions so that we can put it up across to the speaker. And Professor Bala will take over from now.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Madhusudan, for this very lucid and in a very, basically the thought of Vyasa is very profound. And such a profound thought and the vision is explained in such simple language, in a very simple way to all of us. Thank you so much for this wonderful exposition. I really appreciate the way you explained everything to us. And I'm sure this has instigated our viewers to engage with the thought that you have expressed, and I'm sure we will get some interesting questions from our viewers, also seeking some clarifications. But the way I'll just try to react to whatever you have already stated to us in the form of presenting Vyasa as a reformative thinker, no? Because probably the context in which Vyasa was born probably might have necessitated that there are certain kinds of strands which are to be neutralized and which are to be reformed. No, he might have realized the need of reformation during that particular point of time, and that is how probably he might have compiled Vedas, as well as he has written Mahabharata, so that the ordinary as well as the people who are devoted to themselves to the serious study of Vedas, both of them can be like managed quite well, and both of them can be made to be informative through his works. Thank you so much for also pointing out that how Veda has now that after listening to your talk, when I look at the picture of Vyasa in my mind, the kind of enormous cultural unity that we find around us, in spite of the diversity that exists around us. No, it is largely because of the vision of one
Exactly.
person who lived long back. We don't know even when he lived. No,
Yeah.
such an enormous amount of influence that he has exercised for thousands of years together, which is a really a wonderful thing that we have to realize when we have to understand the importance of Vyasa in building the Bharatiya Samskriti that we call. No, whether we should use this English word culture, etc., I don't know, but
Yeah.
Bharatiya Samskriti, if we are using, then it is definitely it is Vyasa who has built this whole edifice on which we are standing now. And when he wrote Mahabharata, as you have explained, he tried dharma to be at the center and all the other purusharthas to serve or to be in consonance with dharma. And that's what he wanted to propagate. That is how Mahabharata is also called a dharma shastra, no? A shastra which preaches how to practice dharma. This you have very well pointed out when you said it talked about Vyakti Dharma, it talked about Jati Dharma, it talked about Kula Dharma, and also it did not limit there itself. It talked about Vishwa Dharma as well. No, the universal Dharma that it talked about, and something that is very interesting and intriguing that you are trying to present in terms of political philosophy of Mahabharata as Rashtra Dharma, whatever they require. Thank you so much for this, for these replies and responses to the questions. And thank you so much for the wonderful talk as well. I really enjoyed being here and listening to you. And you have very well stressed the importance of Vyasa. No? We should have started with you, in fact, because Vyasa,
Yes.
the talk on Vyasa should be in the beginning itself, but it's not late.
Not late.
Thank you so much for being there.
Thank you.
Now I request Dr. Geetesh to take the proceedings further.
Thank you, Professor Bala. Well, after this talk, I would like to share a couple of points here. With many of us who are interested in the Mahabharata scholarship are usually rooted in the readings regarding the issues and concerns of human life and living as explained in the text Mahabharata, but very few go to the beginning and the end of the text, which is the author of the text, and that is Maharishi Veda Vyasa. In today's session, I think, as Professor Bala just mentioned, we've been able to do justice of giving time to the author of the text, wherein Professor Penna has shed light on the vision and the mission of sage Vyasa. How beautifully he explained that Maharishi Vyasa has been responsible for cultural, religious, and philosophical unity of India through the composition of the text Mahabharata. Undoubtedly, Vyasa is a sage with a mission, and his huge vision is rooted in Dharma, as today's talk did bring the points before us to reflect upon and to take it up as some form of study in near future. Well, the Dharma remains to be the focal point of the epic of Mahabharata and the topic of pertinent interest in all ages. And interestingly, we've had questions on Dharma today also. Well, Professor Penna, on behalf of Professor Bala and our team of Spark Project, Department of Philosophy of University of Delhi and Kamala Nehru College, as well as our participants, I thank you for being with us to enlighten us on the vision, mission, as well as the action plan of Maharishi Vyasa in very beautifully arranged words. I'm sure it has given our younger scholars many points to take it forward. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you,
especially for sparing time when you have been lined up for the whole day.